We are going to talk about the mistakes that specifically Adepta Sororitas players make. We're not talking about general 40k rules mistakes. I have a playlist of like 55 videos with rules guidance on how to play 40k. And these are rules mistakes, not tactical mistakes. The choices you make for units and weapons and strategy will depend on your opponent and the battlefield situation. Zephyrim with Handflamers is ideal if you face waves of Tyranid Gaunts regularly, but if you keep facing a Chaos Space Marine player who loves Possessed, the Inferno Pistols will be a better choice. That is a whole other video. I was looking to cover 6 common mistakes around units and rules that Adepta Sororitas players new and old will make. The 5th mistake covers a lot of units. Are there 6 mistakes though? Well, there was going to be 6 until I did a community poll to ask people about the mistakes they made, and now there are way more than 6. I wanted to make a joke about Miracle Dice and wanting to get 6s, so like if you get 6 right, then that's like rolling a Miracle Dice for 6. I can't think of a good Adepta Sororitas joke around the number 11. So pretend I made a funny joke about that. Ha ha ha, wasn't that hilarious? Let's begin. I don't make these mistakes because when it comes to Adepta Sororitas, I woke up earlier than you by not going to sleep last night. And when I'm tired, I do make mistakes. The Codex can be confusing! And when it came out, I got 2 of these wrong, the Stratagem and the Repentia ability. So at the end of the video, put a score for yourself out of 11 in the comments. If you got full marks, I'm proud of you and also jealous of you. We have a complicated relationship. When I asked you all about the mistakes you made, forgetting rules was really common. I can't help with that other than suggest you have a paper note on the table listing the rules you forget, with bullet points. Exorcist causes battle shock. Retributors have reroll wound rolls of 1 whenever they fire ranged weapons. The Dialogus can un-battle shock units, and so on. But the first one we're talking about is the Zephyrim. Their special ability. Special abilities can be easily forgotten. I constantly forget the Exorcist special ability. Every day I wake up, fire my Exorcist, and forget their ability. Without context, that line also works, but we're talking about the really cool church organ, and when Sister Gertie plays the keys, missiles come out. Except we're not talking about the Exorcist. We're talking about the Zephyrim. The Zephyrim get sustained hits or lethal hits, or both if they charged and you discard a Miracle Dice. These bonuses are for the attacks caused by power weapons, so this won't apply to the weapons of characters in the unit unless they have a power weapon. The Canoness with a jump pack and a halberd, she gets no lethal hits or sustained hits from the unit rule, but if you have her equipped with the power weapon and a handflamer, the power weapon will benefit. Celestine's Ardent Blade won't get any benefit, but the power weapons of the Gemini will get the benefit. Number 2 is Miracle Dice. You have a list of the things you can use Miracle Dice for. You cannot use it for the number of shots fired. This is a really common mistake. So you cannot automatically roll a 6 for the number of shots the Exorcist missile fired. Not allowed. You also can't use it on Hazardous tests. Again, you may be thinking of Command Reroll. Command Reroll can reroll Hazardous tests. Command Reroll can reroll the number of shots for a weapon. But you cannot use Miracle Dice on this. You cannot auto-pass or deliberately fail a Hazardous test. Maybe you really want your +1 to hit on the unit for the rest of the turn by having the superior blow-up. But you cannot force it. It is random if it happens. For charge rolls and battle shock tests, you cannot use 2 dice. Not even in the Army of Faith, where you can do 2 acts of faith per unit per phase. An act of faith is 1 dice substitution for a roll. So if you have a charge roll, you substitute 1 of the dice. You cannot substitute both dice. You could do this in 9th edition. That comes down to reading the rules. What is less obvious, if you reroll the dice with a Miracle Dice included, like rerolling a charge roll, the Miracle Dice you used on that first charge roll is gone. You are rerolling the dice, it is a new roll. But you can also use Miracle Dice on the reroll. So you can reroll a charge because of the Zephyrim Sacred Banner. You could save a Miracle Dice substitution for the reroll if the initial charge is not enough. Then on the reroll, put in a high Miracle Dice first and reroll the 1 remaining dice. We all know that you put in the Miracle Dice before rolling the dice. You don't substitute out a dice roll after rolling it. Miracle Dice are quite powerful. That would make them too powerful. For many abilities like the Zephyrum's Embodied Prophecy, you can discard Miracle Dice to activate them. So we come to the Palatine's Rapturous Blows. Sometimes, no matter how many times you read a rule, it doesn't make sense. Rapturous Blows is a rather unique ability in 40k. I don't think any other unit or character in any other army has something like this, where you cause mortal wounds with an attack. There is in Crusade. So with Rapturous Blows, you discard a Miracle Dice. Then every time one of your attacks causes a successful wound, the enemy suffers a mortal wound in addition to normal damage. What is a successful wound? That is succeeding on the wound roll. So if you roll to hit and you roll a 6, if the Palatine is leading a unit, that is a lethal hit. That is a successful wound. That will cause a mortal wound. If your Strength 4 attack then successfully wounds the enemy by having a successful wound roll, that is a successful wound that will be causing a mortal wound. If the enemy fails the save, or passes the save, or succeeds on a feel no pain save, it doesn't matter. You successfully wounded by succeeding at the wound roll. You scored a wound. This means the number of wounds that you can score is equal to the attack's characteristic. So unmodified with any enhancements, that is 4 attacks. So the most you can cause is 4 mortal wounds. It doesn't count the amount of damage that you do per attack or overall. It is the number of successful wound rolls for the number of attacks you have. Your opponent will take the saves for all of the regular attacks that are at AP -2 and damage 2. After that, mortal wounds are applied. And if you had the Blade of St. Eleanor or you were doing an epic challenge, mortal wounds can be applied with the precision rule. So if an enemy character in the unit has 4 wounds, you could apply your 4 attacks to regular bodyguard models and then apply all of the mortal wounds to the character to kill them. It is stupid that Games Workshop has wounds as a characteristic and also wounds where you roll against their toughness, and they're both called wounds. That's silly. Age of Sigmar doesn't have that anymore. Hopefully that changes in 11th edition to be less stupid. Okay, let's talk about the confusing thing the Palatine can do with plasma pistols. And hazardous tests. Hazardous tests that are failed, if there is more than one model in the unit that has a hazardous weapon, the wounds for failed hazardous tests do not go on the character. And it is if you have a hazardous weapon, not if you fired the hazardous weapon. So if the Palatine fired her plasma pistol, and the Sister Superior in the unit did not fire her plasma pistol, and you rolled a 1 on the hazardous test, the Sister Superior would die. I know that makes no sense. The Sister Superior didn't fire her pistol, but that is how the hazardous rules work. If they both fired their pistols and they overcharged their plasma pistols, you don't roll 1 hazardous test for each model. You don't roll 1 for the Superior and then 1 for the Palatine. You roll 2 dice. 1 from the Palatine, 1 from the Superior, but if either one was failed, the Sister Superior would die. If they both failed, the Sister Superior would die, and then the Palatine would suffer 3 mortal wounds. So you cannot get the through suffering strength and get the bonuses from it by having your model below half strength if you failed the hazardous test, if there was another model you could fail that test on. If this was your plan, have the Palatine with a plasma pistol, but don't have a plasma pistol on the Sister Superior in the unit, have a hand flamer or a condemner bolt gun or a combi weapon. Leave the I lost a model in a unit to plasma pistol because I overcharged the weapon that is not part of the Holy Trinity and now I'm below starting strength, so my unit has a +1 to hit for other units that do not have the Palatine in them. Like Celestian Sacrosancts. Okay, let's do Celestian Sacrosancts. Characters generally doubling up on units. Celestian Sacrosancts can only have 1 character in their unit. Yes, a Hospitaller can join them. Yes, Junith Erutia can join the squad. But you cannot double up with Junith and a Hospitaller in a Sacrosant squad. You can only ever have 2 characters in a Battle Sister squad. Regular Battle Sister squad. No other unit in the Adepta Sororitas roster can have 2 characters in the same unit. I know Crusaders say, if you can join Battle Sisters, you can join this unit, but on all of the unit cards, it says you can only add 2 characters to a Battle Sister squad, so you don't add 2 to Crusader squads. There are also limits on which characters can double up. You cannot have an Imagifier and a Hospitaller in the same Battle Sister squad. One is like leader type, like the Palatine or Canoness, and one is a support character like a Dialogus or a Hospitaller. All the rules for doubling up are on the support characters like the Hospitaller, the Imagifier, and the Dialogus. If your character doesn't mention doubling up, like the Canoness doesn't mention doubling up, you can't double up with any character. It has to be like, here's the Hospitaller. She can join a Battle Sister squad and can do so even if there is a Palatine already in the squad. That's what you're looking for. And only Battle Sisters. A common mistake I used to see from Adepta Sororitas players is not being subscribed to the channel. Ask on Facebook or Reddit or in my own Discord channel linked in the description who is the best person to go to for Adepta Sororitas advice, and it's me, Christian von Carmian. I am counting this as one of the mistakes, so you have to subscribe to get full marks. Alright, the Light of the Emperor Stratagem. This is a mess of a stratagem. It is not a simple ignore all modifiers like it was in the index and how it's explained in the rules commentary. It is its own separate thing, and I have made mistakes with it. You see, there's a difference between modifying characteristics like improving a ballistic skill by 1, which is, in practice, +1 to hit, but it is different from a real +1 to hit on the dice roll. Light of the Emperor ignores all modifiers to your top profile, things like the toughness, the objective control, and the save. So your save characteristic is 3+, but what happens when you get shot by an armor penetration -2 weapon? That modifies the dice roll. So you rolled a 3, that normally would succeed, but -2, it's a 1, which is not successful. Your save characteristic technically has not changed. The dice roll has changed. So the Death Guard Plague that modifies your movement, your objective control, that is ignored. The Death Guard Plague that modifies your save, you can ignore because that is modifying the save characteristic. Your armor save is 3+, but then you get hit by a common power sword that's AP -2, so a 5 is required because when you subtract 2, then you get to 3, which is your armor save. Is your head spinning? It might be. It's a stratagem you have to read again and again for every situation. The stratagem ignores modifiers to your weapon skill and ballistic skill, and then it also ignores modifiers to hit rolls. It doesn't ignore modifiers to your weapon's profile, just the ballistic skill and weapon skill, yet it does affect rolls made with those characteristics, only ignoring some of the things. So, it doesn't ignore modifiers to damage, like a Redempted Dreadnought is -1 damage. So if your Immolator is firing at a Redempted Dreadnought, the Heavy Bolter that is damage 2 is still affected by the -1 damage, going down to damage 1. However, the Multi-Melter fired by the Immolator, that damage is a roll, and the stratagem lets you ignore modifiers to rolled damage. Yeah, I really dislike this stratagem. It can be useful, if you understand it. This is going to be the most rewatched part, so we'll move on for now. We're going to talk about the Repentia. With the Overseer of Redemption rule, as long as you have a Sister Superior model in the unit, Sisters Repentia models can reroll hit rolls and wound rolls. There are 2 different profiles. One is a Repentia Superior, the other is Sisters Repentia. Only the Sisters Repentia models get to reroll the hit rolls and the wound rolls. The Repentia Superior's Neural Whips do not get to reroll. Any attached characters who use the Catechism of Divine Penitence enhancement to join the Repentia will not get the rerolls. You can only attach characters to the Repentia with this enhancement. That is another part of Repentia I see people continually getting wrong. No character can join Repentia at time of recording, except for the Canoness, Palatine, or Ministorum Priest, if they have this enhancement. Part of understanding the Repentia is knowing the difference between rules that affect models and rules that affect units. So let's talk about the Penitent Host. The detachment works off the Penitent keyword. You can select a Vow of Atonement at the start of the battle round, and these affect Penitent models from your army. It does not affect every unit with the Penitent keyword. So if you use the Catechism of Divine Penitence to give your jump pack canoness the penitent keyword and then attached her to Zephyrim, she is a penitent model. She will get the benefits of Absolution in battle to have +1 attack and strength. The Zephyrim are a penitent unit, because at least one model has the penitent keyword, but they are not penitent models, so the Zephyrim models do not get +1 to attack or +1 strength. But that canoness with the Zephyrim as a penitent unit could use Lash of Guilt. Then they can move and advance and still charge. Penitent unit, even though not every model has the penitent keyword. It's the same as like the Psyker keyword. A librarian joins a tactical squad. That unit has the Psyker keyword, so anti-Psyker weapons will hurt the unit much easier. But just the librarian is a Psyker model. So if you had a Ministorum Priest joining Dominions in the Penitent Host attachment, you could use Boundless Zeal. They can fall back and shoot and charge. But if you use Purity of Suffering as a stratagem, that affects a Penitent unit, but the effect is Penitent models get a 4+ Fear No Pain. So that would only help the Ministorum Priest, not any of the Dominions. I still see people making the same mistake on character abilities. Unit abilities affect all the models in the unit. So if the Seraphim can perform Angelic Ascent and move after shooting, having Celestine in the unit, she also does this. Abilities affecting the unit as a whole, everyone benefits, including attached leaders. Unless it says model. Two main examples come to mind. The canoness on foot has the Emperor's Grace. That model can have a 2+ invulnerable save once per game. And you have to declare that at the start of the phase, before enemies have like picked where they're fighting and which order, and whether they're using precision attacks or not. You've got to use that at the start of the phase. Sometimes it won't really matter what order you pick to solve combat resolution, but it's something to remember. Use this ability at the start of the phase. And it only affects her, not her unit. The Ministorum Priest has the Zealot ability. Once per battle, in the fight phase, you can improve the attacks and strength of that model by 3. So if you are leading Arcoflagellants, you're not seeing 9 attacks per Arcoflagellant if they use their trigger word. Once per game, the Ministorum Priest will be strength 8 and 6 attacks on their Vindictor. That's what it is, just that model. That was a long one, so you need to know the models and units for the Penitent Host, and for the Canoness, and for the Preacher to get your marks on that one. Here's another separate example, which is its own thing. Morvenn Vahl. Morvenn Vahl's Righteous Repugnance, and we're talking about 2 things with Righteous Repugnance. To get the Miracle Dice, Morvenn Vahl's model needs to be the one that destroys an enemy unit. If Morvenn Vahl's Paragon Warsuits destroy an enemy unit, you do not get the Miracle Dice. Morvenn Vahl's attacks have to be the attacks that destroy the enemy unit. The second thing is, there are 2 separate sentences with Righteous Repugnance. Sentence 1, each time the model's unit is selected to shoot or fight, you can discard a Miracle Dice. If you do, you get 3 more attacks to Fidelis and the Lance of Illumination. That is one thing. A totally separate sentence, each time an enemy unit is destroyed by this model, you gain a Miracle Dice. If you're thinking, well, they're both part of the same rule, so you have to do one to do the other. If you don't spend the Miracle Dice, you can't gain the Miracle Dice. That is not correct. We know that Games Workshop divides its rules into separate sentences with different parts because of the Divine Intervention Stratagem, which recently got updated. It used to say, discard 1 to 3 Miracle Dice. And then, if you do that, you get to set the model back up. It has now been changed to say, you can discard 1 to 3 Miracle Dice, full stop. Then it goes on to say, you set the model back up on the battlefield. You don't have to do the first part to do the second part. That is what the update changed. If you still had to do the first sentence to make the second sentence happen, there would be no reason to change the wording, because the effect would still be, you discard 1 to 3 Miracle Dice, then you set the model back up. Now it is saying, first sentence, you can discard 1 to 3 Miracle Dice, second sentence, you get the model back up and it gets a number of wounds plus the number of Miracle Dice you spent. So with Righteous Repugnance, first part, you can discard a Miracle Dice to get more attacks. Second part, Each time an enemy unit is destroyed by this model, you gain a miracle dice. If you didn't discard a miracle dice, but Morvenn Vahl kills a unit, you still gain a miracle dice. I think they should be separate rules for clarity, but Games Workshop seems to be indicating that if they're different sentences, you don't have to do the optional thing in one sentence to get the things in the next sentence. Okay, Immolators. Immolators have an ability to split a unit into 2 units of 5. It is always 2 units of 5, you can't have a unit of 6 and a unit of 4. You take a unit of 10, you split them into 2 units of 5, and then you assign characters after that. You can't add Astrid and Agatha to a Battle Sister squad and then split it to be Astrid and 5 sisters and then Agatha and 5 sisters. It is 10 sisters split into 2 units of 5 sisters, and then you add Astrid and Agatha to one of those separate units of 5. The 5 sisters with Astrid and Agatha couldn't go in the Immolator because that's 7 models, and the Immolator only fits 6 models. These are totally separate units for all the rules purposes. If one unit of 5 is destroyed, you gain a miracle dice because that is a unit destroyed. Separate units. If one unit is below starting strength because one model has been destroyed, the other unit will not get the Hallowed Martyrs benefit for being below starting strength. Their starting strength is 5. If there are 5 models in the unit, then they are at full strength. The cherubs in the unit are not a model. Cherubs are a unit ability. As per an FAQ, you now need to pick which one of the 2 Battle Sister units gets the cherub. The Immolator can only split Battle Sisters, Dominions, and Novitiates, the units that start with a starting strength of 10, with no option for a starting strength of 5. So if the points for Sacrosanct or Repentia were favourable towards bigger units, like 80 points for 5, but 150 points for 10, you cannot make a point saving by splitting that unit with an Immolator, because explicitly, the Immolator can only split units of 10 Sisters, 10 Dominions, and 10 Novitiates. If you want to put a squad of Repentia in an Immolator, you just have a squad of 5 and they go in the Immolator. If you have a squad of 10 Repentia, they don't fit in an Immolator, and you would have to put them in a Rhino instead, or have them on foot. I would love it if you could support me with a little bit of money, like enough to buy me a drink. That would be great. And now you should put your score out of 11 in the comments. The next one I want to talk about is understanding Celestine's wound allocation, but for that you need to click on the next video. Today's video was part of a series of videos helping people to understand Adepta Sororitas in 40k, so that you play it right, play it well, and play it for fun. Have a great day of 40k.